chime in what's happening with your favorite KFAN shows? You can. It's very easy. You can make your voice heard on the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. Just let us know what you have to say by texting your message to 64686. That is 64686. Standard text message and data rates apply.
All right, we are indeed back. The 4 o'clock hour will include a visit with Russo Radio at 4:30, Gessling at 5 o'clock, and then Lavelle will join at 5:30 this evening. Let's get to some texts that have come in, including some folks who are standing by their belief that schedule release day is magnificent, a day I look forward to, and that I'm not going to apologize about it or for it. Example, John, Playa Vista, California. Some of us football fans that plan our lives around our favorite teams look forward to the schedule release. My wife's, for example, my wife is a 49ers fan. I'm a longtime purple-blooded Viking rube. We live in L.A., and whenever there's a chance for us to see one of our teams in a relative city, be it close or an excuse to see family, we jump on the plane tickets and Airbnbs. So there you go. By the way, which Vikings player is being portrayed behind the menu in the schedule release commercial? Skoll. That's the kicker, isn't it Reichard?
It was.
I think it's Will Reichard, who's a pretty damn good kicker, I might add. 952 guy. Dan, the schedule release is important for fans. Flights get jacked up for traveling fans. Yesterday, I booked a hotel room in Green Bay and flights to New England. Once the schedule drops, they go way up. The fly to Vegas a couple years ago for the Vikings-Raiders game cost $1,000. A typical flight to Vegas is perhaps $300. So there you have it. Where were we? Oh, you and I have not been on the air together since the Wild season ended in such disgrace. I say disgrace because the run isn't disgraceful. But the finish is, it's...
They ran out of gas.
It's that's too easy.
Well, that's not the only reason. I've got, you know me, I've got ripping to do, but
so
it looked like they just...
I've suggested for 2 days, and I think this lesson applies to the Vikings, the Wolves tonight as well. You know the football cliche, especially in football. A good offense is, a good defense, basically. In other words, defense can make with interceptions. They take the ball away. The best offense is a good defense. I think what we saw the other night was that the Wild forgot once they were up 3-0, the best defense is a good offense. If you continue to do the things or try to do at least some of the things you were doing, can't always succeed, but if you continue to try, that puts their defense at further risk and takes away their chances to get back in the game. I think we did stop playing for important stretches, and I think same for the Wolves. The Wolves need to score more in this game, and they have to put more pressure on San Antonio Davey, I think, on that end of the court. So what else did you see? Really not just – because I don't want to let Game 4 go either. Game 4 is the game that, to me, I still don't understand, given that the coach says they consciously, intentionally decided to go a different way. I mean, Guardsy told me this morning, and I missed this, that there's a quote, was it from one of the Felinos? I can't remember who it was from, basically indicating that after their Game 3 success, they got cocky. And I'm thinking to myself, how is that possible, if you mean it? If it's not, you're just saying it because you got to say something to reporters. How can winning that game make you cocky against a great team? How? You got no championship belts. You got no Stanley Cups that you're parading around the Twin Cities. How can that early in that series, one good performance, make you cocky? It's inexplicable to me.
I agree. I think that's a preposterous statement that you could be. I mean, yeah, it was a great game, fun to watch.
It was,
but that doesn't win a series, and especially coming off 2 straight L's in pretty much embarrassing fashion in Colorado. To be cocky after that, I don't know. To me, though, the story of the series is that we were just overmatched, and especially in the center depth. We talk about it. How many times do we say, when are the Wild going to get a top center? When are they going to address that position, win faceoffs? They lose Joel Eriksson, their best faceoff taker, and you've got no one else behind them. None. Colorado has 3 centers that would be the top center on the Minnesota Wild. 3 of them. It's just, and it affects everything. It affects starting with the puck. It affects moving it, getting it to your wingers and setting up your Kaprizovs and Boldies. So the fact that, and then Brodin goes down as well, and Middleton was mostly terrible for essentially the whole playoffs, but especially in this series. So you had no backup for Brodin. I always harp about the scoring depth, and it felt like this was the year they had scoring depth up and down, but they had no structural depth. It felt like they lost Ekin, Brodin, and that was it. Those are 2 huge losses, but they had no one to replace them and no other centers that could do the job that a McKinnon, a Kadri, a Nelson, all of them could do.
That's part of the discussion we got into yesterday. Your margin for success cannot be as thin as we didn't have Eriksson Ek.
I agree.
Right? And for 2 reasons. One, he's not a star. I would call him, would you call him a good player or a very good player?
I'd say he's a very good player.
Okay, we'll go very good. I think probably most hockey people would say the same thing. But part of the reason he stands out, I think, above and beyond what he does is because they don't have anybody else. And that goes back to depth at the position, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, his value is increased not because on the basis of the way people were talking about him, he's like, well, he's underpaid. Brodin's underpaid. Well, it's in part that you don't have those losses are especially Eriksson Ek, given the position he plays, seem completely out of proportion for the fact that, he is a very good player, but he's not a I don't think anybody would call him a superstar, but we almost have to treat him that way because when he's not there, we can't come close to replacing him. That's got to change, and I don't know how you do it, but that's part of the margin for error cannot be that thin in any season, especially because now this is the second time in the poll, and this isn't me calling Eriksson Ek soft, but he's missed, isn't it 2 different playoff years, 2023, and now this year he missed, a significant time. I think there have been at least 2.
Yeah, I remember he tried to come on for warm-ups and immediately skated off.
Yes. So he's a tough guy. It's bad luck, but again, you've got to have enough of an alternative, even if the guy that you're asking to replace him isn't as good as him or a star, good enough that we're not acting like, how can you win without Eriksson Ek? It's impossible. It's impossible to do it. It's impossible to do it because you do not have somebody else. And Guerin, we've argued about this on the air. Guerin gets very sensitive to the whole center thing, right? He's basically said the game's changed. People are too obsessed with it's a center as opposed to a winger. A lot of parts are almost interchangeable, and it's about pressure. And does anybody after this run believe that? I don't. Not if they're watching and they're going to, on the other hand, say we really missed Eriksson Ek, right? There's a reason people are saying that.
I remember in the press box with you, Bill Guerin basically saying, I think face-off guys are a waste of time, and I don't think they're worth anything.
Yes.
And I could not believe what I was hearing. Yeah. And, I mean, I was looking at the stats, and actually the Wild won 52% of the face-offs in that fateful game. But overall, the center depth, it was obvious that coming into that the Avs had the clear and overwhelming advantage, and it showed.
Yeah, unfortunately it did. We'll get a lot more post-mortem from Russo at the bottom of the hour. He listened to the commentary or comments of several players. It appears that you mentioned Guerin and Heinze are going to chat with the Jackals on Monday. Maybe we get Guerin on Monday. For those wondering on Heinze, and I know this is part of the subject with Russo, there is zero indication that he is in any kind of difficulty. Because I know for a lot of people, it's like, well, no, I don't think he should be fired, but there's some really interesting big names that are out there available that are kind of enticing. I don't think there's any reason to believe that Heinze is there's any chance whatsoever that there's going to be a big announcement Monday or Tuesday that Heinze is indeed out. Bonus bucks?
Yes, the Fan and BigDeck.com will give you a shot to win those bonus bucks for the National Cash Contest. Head to KFAN.com. The keyword is fun. The keyword fun. KFAN.com. Keyword fun.
Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barreiro.
All news is in town. Chances to win tickets or just knowing what's going on with all of your favorite KFAN shows. You can follow KFAN 1003 on all of our social channels like Instagram, TikTok, X, and YouTube. Stay connected and follow the sports leader, the Fan.
By the way, from the Learn Something New Every Day department, we were talking about, I don't know what the context was originally. How did the whole thirst slaker thing come up? What was I talking about that led me to that? Well, we ended up talking about that term and an ad campaign for a beer back in the 60s called Falstaff into the 70s. Well, it's pronounced slacker, as it turns out. Even though there's no C in front of the K, it's thirst slacker.
Well, that's what kept coming up when you asked me to search what it was just slacker. I'm like, I don't think that's what it is.
Well, I spelled it right, though. I spelled it right. I spelled it S-L-A-K.
Yeah, it kept saying, do you mean
Yeah, you mean,
slacker?
yeah. No, because it's a word. That much I knew, but I was mispronouncing the word. So you learn something new every day. 651 guy says, you're saying Heinze's fine, but what if the Wild brought back Jacques Lemaire? I have to admit that at that point, all bets are off for me. I've lost myself in Jacques Lemaire's eyes many times. I worship the hockey ground he walks or has walked. So, yeah, I guess if you could convince me that Jacques still had the passion for it, still, it still burned, the fire in the belly hadn't gone away, and he was ready to jump back in. Yeah, that'd be the one guy I'd say, yeah, let's go get him. Let's go bring Jacques back. Because that's still our best season ever. How many years ago was that? 20?
23?
More than 20, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Anyone questioning Heinz's job, I think, is just kidding themselves because of the relationship that, regardless of whether he should not,
yeah, no,
he's staying.
He's staying. Will he be safe forever? Who knows? I mean, all bets are off on that. Even people who become very friendly and loyal to each other, eventually that can change. And I'm not in the group that says he should be in any trouble. I am still sort of trying to process the bizarre nature of what he said after Game 4, because it lends credence to the notion that it wasn't just that they're better. It lends credence to the notion that consciously, the better word in 2026, of course, is intentionally, the Wild did not follow the game plan that had been so successful in game number 3. And when you got a player saying we were cocky, there is, I think, reason to question and say, well, man, the coach has got to take care of that, doesn't he? But I again believe sometimes players talk to talk, and they know they have to, Foligno's, I think it was Foligno on the cocky, I'm not sure, but he's one of those go-to guys, so he's always got to have something to say, and you always got to come up with something. So, in any case, where were we here? We got some questions already coming in for Russo. That's good. He's going to join us, as I said at the bottom of the hour, 646-86. There's another Russo. See what you think of this. I disagree with the need for a different center. Our defense, or at least half of our defense, is way undersized. Faber, Hughes, Zuccarello, and everybody, and it showed because those guys were getting manhandled by Colorado every game. These guys aren't big enough to protect themselves. They're just not big enough to lay a hit. They're not big enough to properly protect and play defense against these teams with these large forwards and centers. Is there anything to that, do you think?
I'll ask who had the worst plus-minus out of those guys and who was on the ice for majority of goals against. A guy by the name of Jake Middleton. He's a pretty big guy. And how'd that work out? Yeah, not very well. So,
he was on the ice for every goal that we gave up, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
close to it.
He's a big guy. He can lay hit. I just think the size thing is so overplayed.
Well, size has to be coupled with ability, right? You got to have some of both. I mean, in a perfect world, you have some of both, right? You don't want just size. I think size is good. I think we all agree it can be helpful in a physicality standpoint, but size for the sake of size doesn't work out. They've got to be effective. Correct. It has to be effective use of size.
And you can't throw out a guy that has all the ability in the world, a la Quinn Hughes, because he's not the biggest guy in the world. Like that's just not how the game works.
We've got a controversy developing here. So I've got a couple of linguists saying that I was right the first time, that it's slake, as in thirst slaker. When I always thought it was. I thought that's what I remember from the commercial. But then when I look it up and Merriam-Webster, I think the pronunciation key seems to indicate slacker. So I'm going to try to get to this is the kind of controversy that no other show will cover, and we're going to get to the bottom of it by the time we're done at 6:30 this evening. 612 guy writes, the Wild could have used Jacques' blue line trap in the third period. The vaunted blue line trap in the third period. How about Russo next? A lot of good questions already coming in. Don't forget Ben Gessling at 5 and Lavelle E. Neal III, 5:30. Very busy program as we prepare for Wolves Spurs Game 6 late tonight on The Fan.
You're listening to Barreiro on The Fan. The Timberwolves need to win to extend their series with the Spurs in Game 6 from Target Center.
Yeah, a lot of votes coming in for Slaker, Thirst Slaker, not Slacker, as I thought it was. So we'll try to, as I say, get to the bottom of this controversy at by the time we'll wrap things up at 6:30 tonight. Russo Radio has been very busy today. It's the post-mortem day. Although I don't think the coach or the general manager spoke today. Lots of Wild players did indeed meet the media jackals. Russo, for you, a lot of this stuff could be routine, right? The day after, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. But did anything in terms of the comments you listened to and watched from various Wild big shots, talking about player big shots, stand out to you? Anything catch your ear?
Not really. I mean, I was joking with some fellow reporters today that one day I would love to ask a pending unrestricted free agent, do you want to return to Minnesota? And that person say, absolutely not. I can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah. We're all waiting for that, right?
So, yeah. Like, I've never had that. Like, even Gus Nyquist said last year, I hope the Wild bring me back. And I'm like, I'm thinking after that offsides in Game 5, there's the chance of that 0. So, yeah, I mean, obviously today that was a big deal. We got 5 of the 8 unrestricted free agents, Johansson, McCarron, Zuccarello, Tarasenko, and Nick Foligno. Those were the 5 we got. All obviously said they want to come back. Johansson, he has to sort of decide on if does he want to go back to Sweden, does he want to come back here or test free agency. Nick Foligno said that he has to decide if he wants to play next year, but it sounded like he did. And same thing with Zuccarello, was pretty adamant that he wants to play and really doesn't want to go anywhere else. So we'll see. I mean, I think that they have to do the autopsy on the season and then decide on who they want back. Obviously, we'll get Bill Guerin and John Hines on Monday. But, the big thing is, one reason why I do think that Bill is going to want to really decide on who he wants to bring back and then try to get them done in fairly short order is it really then gives them specific fiscal certainty going into the offseason on how much money they have for July 1, how much money they have in potentially making trades, how much money they could afford Quinn Hughes. So I think that you want to try to figure that out pretty quickly.
Let's take one last look back at Game 5. You've written about it extensively. You've probably thought about it even more. Now that there's a little distance, a little time, I guess I should say, between the collapse and now, what stands out to you as you look back on it? How do we explain it?
Well, first of all, I know that there's a lot that we're going to all make of Game 5 forever, because if they get through this series, I really think the sky's the limit for them. But this series was lost in Game 4. I think Bill Guerin is still seething over that game more than even Game 5. And I think he's seething over the end of Game 5 big time. But Game 4 was inexplicable how they came out and just really stunk up the arena, and then still had a chance to win the game by somehow tying that game up in the third period at 2 on the Sturm goal, and it still took them a couple minutes to just give that game away after 3 straight awful shifts in a row. So I think that was the big thing. But Game 5, like you could see it coming. Like the second period, I even tweeted that they better get this 4th goal because there's no doubt that Colorado, you could just feel it. Colorado was coming back. But really, I think the most disappointing is that the Wild somehow got out of that second period 3-1 and really, defended pretty impeccably the first 15 minutes of the third period. But I think what it shows you is, again, that a lot of the players that should know better, for some reason, when the game's on the line in high-pressure situations, they lose sense of detail and all that type of stuff. And I think that's the thing that if Bill Guerin and John Hines really go back to the tape, that it really could affect some players this offseason, because it wasn't the young kids, it wasn't Kaprizov and Boldy that were screwing up at the end of the game. It was some of the veterans that are on the third and fourth lines or the bottom defense pairs that were messing up. It starts with an icing by Ryan Hartman, where he's 2 strides from the red line. Then, they obviously give up the goal where Spurgeon, he's right there with Jack Drury, but he doesn't tie up his stick. And then on the tying goal, we're all looking at the goal by McKinnon and maybe that a save needs to be made there. But it starts with a Middleton turnover. Then Foligno puts it on Landeskog's stick. I mean, these are veterans that just they've got to be stronger and make stronger plays. And that lost them the game. And then they just look like a jittery team the first 4 or 5 minutes of overtime. I mean, Boldy couldn't make a pass. Kaprizov didn't want to shoot the puck and tried to put a pass through a bunch of traffic that Kulak picked off before the winner. I mean, this is a team that you can't keep on always using as an excuse. Well, Colorado's been there before. We're going to learn our lessons. This is a team that's made the playoffs 12 years in the last, or 10 times in the last 12 years. And you just, you can't just always come back to the old well where this is going to be a learning lesson. So I think they really got to look at some of these guys this offseason and decide, are they ever going to learn?
Sometimes, the cliche is, sometimes the best offense is a good defense. I would turn it the other way, given the way Game 5 played out. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. And one of Louis' complaints yesterday was, especially, he said, after the goaltender change was made, he said, I wanted the first 10 minutes of second period, I wanted much more aggressive offensive pressure, regardless of the score, test the goalie. He's got to be a little bit shaky, too, to get the goal you're talking about, the 4th goal. Obviously not be reckless, but that's part of good defense in a game like that can be your offense. It continues to take the game to the other team.
No, 100%. I mean, we've seen that throughout, right? I mean, even in the Mackenzie Blackwood game in Game 4, it's his first start in 27 days, and the Wild go 19 minutes without a shot at some point.
Yeah.
Then Wedgwood, after being shelled and pulled the last time we saw him, doesn't get tested at all there in the second and third periods. And it again goes, now look, Colorado ramped it up. They didn't flinch. They showed why they're such a contender. But again, the Wild just they just lose the ability to stick to the game plan. I mean, sometimes it's unglamorous, but you just got to dump pucks and go to work and get pucks deep. And the Wild just too many times in these high pressure games make big time mistakes. And I think that there's a lot to like about the season. I think they made a huge step in the first round. They got over that proverbial hump, as I was joking around with Guerin about today. But when your veterans are the ones that continue to be the ones that aren't that are losing their wits, so to speak, in these high pressure moments of high pressure games, it's just concerning. And it just, at some point you can't just keep on rolling it back. And I know they took a big step this year, but I really do think that, there's going to come a point here where you got to look at some of these core members and start, especially now that there's a lot of more flexibility, that you could sit there and, maybe make some trades and try to, move some guys out and try to just change a little bit of the faces inside the locker room.
All right. Within the roster itself, I know you always do a deep dive. I don't know if you've done it yet in terms of, from your analysis, people likely to stay that Guerin's going to recommit to, people you think there's a good chance that whether it's money or just decision going another direction are not going to be here. Give me your unofficial, the names, some names on both sides of that equation.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to say until we start to hear from him on Monday or Tuesday, but I know that he's very disappointed by the way that the season ended. But I do think that there's going to be some potential trades in the works. Like I could see a Danilo Urov being traded. I still, as I've talked to you over and over again, I know that, fans got angry at me for even pointing this out today, but I still think there's a really good chance that Jesper Wallstedt is traded this offseason. Mm-hmm. I just think that if anything, he upped his value even more. But if you look at the way that the Wild played in this postseason, I think at the end of the day, regardless of Eriksson Ek's injury, that there's a couple things that we saw that are still deficiencies on the Wild. One is size on the blue line, and two is their depth up the middle. Even with Eriksson Ek, they lacked depth up the middle, and Jesper Wallstedt is the type of guy that could probably get them a number one center this offseason. And I just think that there's still a very good chance of it. I don't think he's safe no matter what Billy says this week. Because I think that they realize that that this is their best opportunity to get one, especially since they traded Rossi. So he's one. And I do kind of wonder about Jake Middleton right now. He's got 3 years left on his deal. He does have a no move until July 1, but they were not happy with the way that he played in the playoffs. So you do kind of wonder there. Hartman suddenly has a limited no trade clause. Foligno has a no move till July 1, but then becomes a limited no trade. Jonas Brodin is somebody else that has no trade protection. Trennan's another guy that had no trade protection, and I thought he really did nothing in the playoffs and took some really bad penalties. So I do think there's going to be ways to change sort of pieces in the core here. The other thing here is, even though they have $15 million in cap space, that's only with 15 guys signed. So they are going to have to create some cap space this offseason, I think. And, look, when, Kirill Kaprizov took $17 million, maybe 4 more than they originally thought that they would have to pay him. That takes away from, their ability to still do stuff. And that was the decision that he made, that even though he does want to win, that he wanted every penny from this organization. And now it does inhibit them from doing other stuff unless they create some cap space. So I think the way to create cap space is to move some of these $3 or $4 million players maybe to other teams.
Do we need to add a great center to make it not seem so devastating and painful to not having Eriksson Ek, or is getting a good one, just another good center, enough so that we're not constantly talking about, well, it's just not going to work because, Eriksson Ek wasn't available?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're going to trade Wallstedt, it better be a great center. It better be an Austin Matthews, a Robert Thomas, a Dylan Larkin, whomever. It shouldn't be Vincent Trocheck. Let's put it that way. Now, Vincent Trocheck, if he was on this team, would have helped dramatically this offseason, this postseason. So, but I just think that they got to improve. I mean, the one thing that, and I do wonder if Bill's opinion has changed here, is, the Wild believe in today's day and age, because the game is so fast, that it's not like the old days where you need that playmaking or high end center, that you can compensate with play driving wingers like Kaprizov, Boldy, players like that. So that's another reason why I think that they might even go after a Brady Tkachuk this offseason. But I think in this postseason against Colorado, I think it's very clear that, look, you could shut down Kirill and Boldy in with really good checkers, with really good defensemen, and that you still need to compensate from that by having really good centermen. And the Wild just, look, it's been a perennial issue here. They obviously had Rossi, who's a 60-point guy already in his career. They traded him to get Quinn Hughes, which is totally fine. I get it. But, they never really replaced that. And so I do think, that they've got to improve in this area. A lot of it could be growth. I mean, if Danilo Urov isn't traded, seeing him improve here, maybe Charlie Stramel could be that eventual guy, to play up the middle if he's not traded. But I do think that they've got to get, really good to great centermen for this team to take the next step and to, because they're always an Eriksson Ek injury away from problems, and it reared its ugly head again this postseason.
Which is not
Brodin are just
Well, that's the indictment.
Yeah,
right?
they're just always hurt.
Yeah. The line between success and failure is in the kind of success we're talking about, going beyond round two, cannot be to me. Eriksson Ek, it's just bad luck and he's out again. You have to have a buffer. Do you agree with this statement? 651 guy writes, in their history, in their existence, the Wild have never had a top 10 center in the league.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. That goes.
That says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They never have. I mean, they've had really, really good centers.
Mm-hmm.
Mikko Koivu, a really, really good center. Joel Eriksson Ek, a really, really good center. Wes Walz, a really, really good center. Rossi, a really, really good center. But yeah, to this point, they've never had a top 10 center. And that's why I just think that they're motivated. I mean, look, I could tell you for a fact that, after Quinn Hughes was acquired by Bill Guerin, his goal was to make another huge move. And he tried. Yeah. But we saw that no centers got really traded at all except for Nazem Kadri. But nobody was, not even Vincent Trocheck. And it's just really, really hard. The Wild made a huge pitch, as I've said to you before, for Robert Thomas right before the trade deadline, offered, from my understanding, Wallstedt and Urov and plus. And they said no. And that's a huge package. Clearly he was motivated, which shows you that he's going to be motivated this offseason as well. Now, the big question I have is most likely Wallstedt's going to be the guy to get you that person. But so did Wallstedt, in the way that he played in the postseason, sort of change the Wild's mind from that standpoint? Or does it even just, put them in an easier position to maybe make that move? So we'll see. It's going to be a really eventful offseason, I think, just by virtue of, Quinn Hughes making very clear today that he has great interest in returning. And so that they're going to try to get an extension done with him after July 1. Other things that could be. I just think this is the summer that we're going to see some potential trades that we weren't expecting.
Yesterday, Louis did a Charles Barkley-like guarantee on Quinn Hughes coming back here. Are you that? He put it at 10, 0 to 10. Are you as confident as Louis?
Yeah, I am. I've thought this for a while. Obviously, I'm tight with a lot of people around.
Yep.
Quinn, I know how much he loves it here. I'm really tight with his agent. He's a great agent. To me, the best in the National Hockey League. And I think that he is going to, he's somebody that can be worked with. Unlike Kirill's agent, let's put it that way, even though they actually have an affiliation now. And I just think that Quinn realizes that he could win here. This is a very attractive organization. They treat their players incredibly. And I think when he sees the, core members locked up for a long time, like Kirill, like Faber, like Eriksson Ek, like Boldy, I just think that he thinks that he can win here. And the other thing is, look, if he does want to eventually play with his brothers, that could still happen. He's only 26 years old. So, you sign for 3 more years. That's really a 4-year deal because he's got 1 year left. And that aligns yourself with your brother, who's a superstar, and the end of his contract in New Jersey. And then maybe you guys can, figure out where you want to play together, whether that's here, whether that's Jersey, whether that's somewhere else. Maybe in that interim, the Wild figure out a way to get one of the Hugheses or both the other Hugheses. I think that he's staying. I think that he sees a good thing here. I know, look, it was disappointing the way that they let that game go the other day, but I still think that he sees a bright future here. And I don't think today was just a bunch of just words coming out of his mouth to appease everybody. I I witnessed essentially not being in there. I witnessed the exit meeting between Bill Guerin and Quinn Hughes today, and they, the two of them came out just yucking it up and laughing away. And I just think that Bill, essentially told them, get ready. We're going to offer you the moon. And let's, I think the goal here for both of them is to try to get it done pretty quickly after July 1. Certainly not October 1, the way that it happened last year with Kirill.
Dr. Mike writes this. This is, be ready. You might need a pen and a notepad. What does Russo think of switching Boldy to center and then focusing on adding a top power play wing, which is an easier get? Center lineup of Boldy to Eriksson Ek to Hartman to Strammel looks pretty good, though adding Jack Hughes would be the best of all possible worlds. He finishes with this. Obviously, I possess just enough hockey knowledge to be dangerous. What do you think of Dr. Mike's theories?
Yeah, you know what? I'll ask John Hines that on Monday if that's possible. First of all, I don't know if Boldy would want to do it. But, look, they use Boldy whenever they load up, like without Eriksson Ek. At times they were loading up in Game 5, Boldy with Zuccarello and Kaprizov, and they're essentially putting Boldy at center in that situation. There have been times on the power play when Eriksson Ek was out that he was taking draws, and he's actually pretty good at taking draws. I think it's usually a lot easier to move a center to wing than a wing to center for the first time in their career. But Boldy did play some center in college. So, it is an interesting question. I always kind of roll my eyes when fans ask that type of question
Yes.
about Boldy. But, to that person's point, it's a lot easier to go trade for a top 6 winger than it is a top 6 center. And you wouldn't have to give up to Wallstedt to do that. So could it be something that they talked to Boldy about? I mean, could be the most preposterous line of questioning I ever ask a coach and a GM, but I will do it for this Dr. Mike's. All
right, fair enough. That's very open-minded of you.
It's a great question. I will do it. I love the thought.
Well, the way he laid it out,
down right now,
I think made it kind of interesting. All right, as you all know, and I'm sure you're getting a lot of this today, and I'm getting a bunch of it now, saying that it is. Speaking of preposterous to consider trading Wallstedt at this point, that Gus Bus is who you have to trade, notwithstanding I think he's got a no trade for at least a couple more years. But it's an interesting dilemma to me in that clearly he's elevated himself to a place where maybe you get the moon for him, but then there's the trade-off, which is, well, no, has he elevated himself to a place, given the importance of the position, that we got to find another way, or we just have to find a way to keep him, and maybe some way to talk with Gus Bus about, hey, we got some ideas for you. Would you consider waiving it? Is that out of the question that Gus Bus could be the guy somehow, dramatically dealt in this offseason?
Well, I don't see. All right, I could talk about this forever now, okay? And
Good.
First of all, let me just lay out one thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Two goalies today were both asked about their situations. I asked Wally about his situation, and he went on and on about how he hopes that he essentially changed the Wild's mind and that showed them that he's warrant staying and he wants to stay forever. And Sarah McClellan asked Gus, and Gus basically said, look, if somebody wants you, that means they want you. And essentially what he was saying was, yeah, I'd be open to moving my no move type thing. But here's the big thing here. I don't think that Philip Gustafsson could get you that number 1 center, or Jesper can.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's the rub.
By that situation, there's no reason to trade either of them. If you don't want Wally traded, first of all, if you're a fan that doesn't want Wally traded, I never want to hear you ask me again about a number 1 center. He's the guy that could get it, right? But then if Jesper if they decide not to trade Jesper, that's fine. Well, then why trade Wally? There's no reason to trade. Philip Gustafsson. There's no reason to trade him. You might as well come back with 2 great goaltenders next year, and who cares? It's not like that Gus's new contract is preventing them from running their team. Then you have 2 great goalies in an 84-game season. You're going to need both of them to play. You could rotate them again. Gus did have a really good year. There'd be no reason to make the move. All you're doing by trading away Gustafsson and only having Wallstedt is now lessening your depth at the goalie position. The only reason why we are talking about trading Wallstedt is because he's the guy that could probably get you that top center because people look at him as this goalie of the future. I don't think that Gustafson's getting you that. So, like, there's really no reason for them to ask Gus, I think, to waive his no move unless they feel like that 6.8 is just way too much money to have in him. So, you know, like, I don't, like, just because we're talking about Wallstedt and people are like, no, they should trade Gus, like, that makes no sense. It doesn't, the only reason why we're talking about Wallstedt has nothing to do with his contract. It's what he could get you back in return. So I guess what I'm saying is if they don't use Wallstedt to get a number one goalie, I don't even think there's even a reason to consider trading Gustafsson. Yeah. Unless somehow Gustafsson is that guy that could get you that top center. So
which is less
I think that there's
right.
Yeah, so if Wallstedt's not traded, I think they just come back with both of them.
Yeah. So what you're saying is if you're whining incessantly about a top line, you know, upper echelon center, then you have to be willing to give up. That's the guy. That's the piece left.
Yeah, no, I mean,
and you can't have it both ways.
Likely.
Right. That's the
most likely.
So if you say you can't say two things. I'm demanding the center.
Go ahead. Like, just look at it this way: is that this summer, let's just say Austin Matthews available. Let's say Robert Thomas is available. Let's say somehow Dylan Larkin's available. Somehow Hughes and Heischer available. There's a ton of teams that can afford them. There's a ton of teams that need top centers. So you are going to have to differentiate yourselves in your package to get these guys. You're not getting them for Urov and Strammel alone. It's going to have to be something that moves the needle. And the common denominator with Jersey, with Detroit, with Toronto, maybe even Ottawa, is they all need a sort of a quote-unquote great goalie or a goalie of the future. And I just think that Gustafsson probably doesn't move the needle for them as much as a Wallstedt would. And the Wild have given up a ton of assets in the last couple of years. I mean, you know, understandably. Yeah. Like, you know, I still don't really get the Kuzma trade. I think they really probably should regret that trade. It at a minimum, it cost them a significant asset that they could trade in something else. Obviously, the Juracek trade to this point, they traded a boatload for him and then traded him for a healthy scratch in the playoffs. But look, what they gave up for Quinn Hughes changed the trajectory of this organization. But to do that, when you give up, you know, 3 first-round picks and an actual first-round pick, you know, and Rossi Boyum Ogren in the first, you know, you took away a ton of assets that you have. So, you know, Wallstedt's what you got now to be the one that's going to move the needle for any type of trade.
You can have Wallstedt or you can have a top-line center, but you probably can't have both. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, that's my gut. I mean, gut, yeah. I just don't think that Urov and Strammel alone is going to do it.
Can you get a 2?
You know, throwing in like more.
Can you get a number 2, number 3 center absolutely. For? I'm talking about for Gus.
Yeah, I mean, like they could go revisit Vincent Trocheck and give up assets for him that don't include Wallstedt. No doubt about it. But I don't know if Vincent Trocheck is Vincent Trocheck. I don't think is moving
the needle enough.
Incredibly handy if they had him this postseason.
Right.
But the reason why they didn't trade for Vincent Trocheck is because they didn't want to take themselves out of these other guys this offseason by trading some of the assets that, you know, like let's just say that Trocheck was going to be Urov in a first. Well, all right, that's okay. But now, you know, that might take you out of something else bigger this offseason. So, you know, that's the calculated risk that Bill Guerin took with not going for whatever they wanted for Trocheck, which we hear was at the time pretty significant assets.
Good conversation to be continued. We'll chat next week. Thanks, Russo.
All right, see ya.
Russo Radio, great stuff from him. We're already a little bit late. We've got a Lavelle at the bottom of the hour. Let's come back and talk Vikings, general manager search, schedule, and who knows what else with our guy Ben Gessling. That's next.
You're listening to Barreiro on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
This report is